So we've already gone ahead and we've set up some FTP accounts, and now we're going to set up a database that will allow us to connect with that database and do the things the way that we want to do. So we've got a couple of options here. The first thing I want to do, I'm going to choose to access the databases here, and it'll tell me that I can add a database, add one now, and that I've got 25 remaining. So I'm just going to call this AdventureWorks. So the database name and the username are the same. And I'm going to set it up with a password. And again, it's got this these criteria that you have to use in order to do it. So I come up with a password. I want to look at the additional options here to see if there's anything that I need to pay attention to. And for now, we're just going to click OK on that. And what that does is it goes into setting up the account. And you'll notice it says pending setup. So it will go through the steps, creating the database and all that stuff. And then we can move forward from there. So after it's done its jumping through hoops, what you do is you come in here and you'll be able to see your database there. And then you'll choose this PHPmyadmin. And that's going to require you to log into that database with the database username and password you had set up. And that brings you into the PHPmyadmin software interface or database interface. And while normally you're not going to have to do this, this gives you the ability to interact with things. So the first thing that we'll see here is that here is a database here. So I'm going to select that. So I could create a new table there. I could run, if I had a database, I could run SQL statements on there. I could search it, or I could import it. So I could create the tables one by one, or I could run an import script. And I'm going to use the import script because I'm using the same database for all of the things that I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and find that, and I will load that into here. And the file that I'm using is a ported version of the AdventureWorks database that was created for the SQL Server that has been ported to MySQL. And so we're going to click Go. And we can see that it's still connecting, and we'll see what happens from here. So it's been a while since I paused this recording to make my way through this, but I'm going to pick up where I think I left off. So I've added a database to the managed databases, and then I went into PHPmyadmin and had to log on to that location. And that location is actually, you have to set up a password and a user ID for the specific database. So that's the password that I'm using. And we'll have to use that same thing when we connect to the database from within Dreamweaver. And that brings me into PHPmyadmin. And what that does is it shows me the databases over here. So when I select this one, what it does is it brings me to this interface for that particular database. Now what I did is I found a database that was out on the web, and that was a SQL database, and I chose to import that. Now within the code in that imported file, I had to change the name at the beginning to tell it the name of the database that I was going into, because otherwise it gives you errors. But I chose import, and it let me point to a particular file and then import it in that way. So that brings me to the point where I now have data in my database. You can tell that by looking over here. For instance, there you can click on customers, and it gives you all the information about it. So that means that I have a database on the SQL server, and so then we have to figure out how we get to it. So that brings us to Dreamweaver. Now when I went to Dreamweaver, and this happens to be the page that I went through, but let me show you what I did. The first thing that I had to do, and I'll go ahead and create another one, is I had to create a new page. In this page, I happen to be working in PHP right now. It has to be a PHP page. And so I set that up, give it a little bit of content here so that we can always just see what's going on. And then once that is set up, what I need to do is I need to make sure I have databases connected. So I've got the database set up from where I walked through it before, and what that is you give it a name, and then you have to have the address of the SQL server. And the place that I found that was you don't automatically know what that is when you're doing this hosting. So what I had to do is I had to go into my hosting details, and I went into the details here, the actions and then details, and what I found is this host name down here. So this is the computer that they ended up hosting that resource on, and I was trying to just add stoutwebtech.com to this, and it wasn't working. So I had to put that full resource in here. The database username, that's the one I was talking about a minute ago. That's the name of the database and the username, the way that GoDaddy sets things up, and the password that I set up when I set up that database. Now, you'll know you're successful when you have this, because when you select that, you'll bring up this select database, and you will be able to see the schema and the name of the database. Any databases that I have in there, it will allow me to access. So I choose that, and then I click OK. Then I can do a test. It'll tell me it's made successfully. And so then I click OK. Now that sets up the database. The next thing that we have to do is we have to set up the bindings. And the bindings is just the way that it goes out and finds information within the database, so that you're not trying to pull the whole thing. So I'm going to choose a record set in this case. And so I come in here, and we'll call it record set 1. You select a connection, and right now I only have one. And then what you do is you come in, and from the database items you need to pick a table that you want to use. And in this case, I'm just going to do select. And what that does is it adds to the SQL string here. It says select, and that star means everything from the table called customers in the database that is referenced from the Stout Web Tech. And so then you can add other variables as where you could choose where you're able to more clearly define it, but we're not going to go into that right now. I click on test, and then that brings me back data. So that way I know that I've successfully been able to link to the data in the table. So that is a very positive thing. So then we click OK, and what that does is in the bindings it leaves this record set 1. That's the name that it had. And so now I have the database. I've told it what bindings I want to use. In other words, what portion of that database. So now I'm going to choose insert, and for testing I'm just going to choose a dynamic table, and I just drug that out into the body of my website here. So I'm choosing record set 1. I can show how many records at a time or all the records if I wanted to do that. I'm just going to do 10 at a time. Then I can do a little bit of styling of that, but I'm not going to do that for now. So I click OK, and then that puts this document in front of me. So you can see that it's built out a table that it's going to want to have represented there. So what I need to do now is I need to give this page a name, and I'm going to call this let's just call it test2.php, and I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to synchronize that up to the server. Now, I'm going to try checking the live here to see if that works. And there it works live, but I always like to double check things on the server, especially when it's a critical function. So the name of that file was test2.php. So I'm going to come into my website and I'm going to put test2.php. Press enter. And then that is the page. So we have successfully connected to that page. We've successfully created a record set that we're going to pull from. And now the third aspect of that is we have successfully presented that information into the body of our website here. So now there's other things that can come along with this. I want to make sure that I am on a new line here. And so I'm going to go back to insert, and there's some other things that I can choose. The last thing I chose is dynamic table. There's other things that you can do, but I'm going to pull out this record set paging. And what this is just I'm going to put a record navigation bar out there. I'm going to try to put a record navigation bar out there. Okay, and so that gives me this here again. I'm going to choose record set. I'm going to choose OK, and then you'll see that it brings in all of this scripting. It's pre-formatted scripting that allows us to look at that. I'm going to save this. And I'm going to go to the live because that functioned well, so I don't have to go out to the server. Now what that allows me to do is choose next and last. And I went straight to last. So let me turn that off. And there should have been previous and next. Anyway, we'll go back to live. And then I can choose next. And it brought me automatically to the end of the database. So let's go out and let's synchronize it and see what's really going on when we get to the server. And I'm just going to make sure I put that up there. Go back to my server, reload it. Okay, so you'll see the numbers changing here. So I can go first. That's what confused me. It started in the 100s. Then I can choose next. I can go to last, which is the last ones in it. And it allows me, without having to write any script, we've successfully been able to pull this data in and then navigate through that data. That's going to conclude this particular video.